A government can pass laws, but it cannot reboot the internet, and this single reality quietly explains how power actually works in the modern world, because for centuries authority was something people could clearly see and recognize. Power had flags, borders, armies, uniforms, courtrooms, and laws. It stood on podiums, marched through streets, and enforced decisions with visible force, and this image shaped how societies understood control. Whoever commanded territory and weapons appeared to command reality itself. But while governments continued to perform this familiar version, power, the foundation beneath them, began to shift, not through revolution or war, but through technology that advanced faster than political awareness. And today, the systems that decide whether a nation functions no longer sit inside ministries or military bases. They exist inside data centers, cloud platforms, satellites, undersea cables, software layers, and semiconductor supply chains that operate silently without national symbols or public accountability. Yet these systems determine whether communication flows, whether economies move, whether elections run, whether hospitals function, and whether defense systems respond at all. Because a modern state may still write laws, collect taxes, and deploy police, but it does not own the infrastructure that executes those decisions. It does not control the cloud where its data lives. It does not operate the satellites enabling navigation and communication. It does not manufacture the chips powering intelligence analysis, weapons, systems, and AI-driven logistics, and it does not fully control the software stacks connecting everything together, which creates a new hierarchy where visible power creates authority. But invisible power creates dependency, and dependency reshapes decision-making in subtle but irreversible ways. Because when a government issues an order, it assumes the system will respond, yet that response depends on networks, platforms, and hardware owned, operated, and maintained by private global companies. And the moment those systems slow, fail, or restrict access, the illusion of control begins to collapse, because no law can instantly restore a network outage, no regulation can manufacture advanced chips overnight, and no political mandate can rebuild a cloud infrastructure on demand. And this is why modern power is no longer defined by who commands the loudest, but by who operates the systems decisions rely on. Because control today is less about issuing orders and more about maintaining uptime, managing access, deploying updates, and sustaining technical complexity that governments rely on but do not fully own. And this shift did not remove state power, but transformed it, because authority still exists, yet execution now flows through invisible channels outside traditional political control, making power less dramatic, less visible, and far more dependent on technology that rarely appears in speeches but increasingly determines what those speeches can actually achieve. This dependency did not emerge through weakness or surrender, it emerged through efficiency, because as technology advanced, governments faced a simple choice: build everything themselves, slowly, expensively, and visibly, or outsource infrastructure. Two companies that promised speed, scale, and reliability, and one by one states chose convenience, because maintaining national data centers required massive budgets, talent, and constant upgrades, while cloud platforms offered instant scalability, redundancy, and security, which is how government data records, communications, and operations quietly moved into infrastructures operated by Amazon, Microsoft, and Google, not because governments trusted them more than themselves, but because there were no realistic alternatives. And this shift transformed ownership into access, because cloud services are not assets, they are permissions, and when data lives inside private infrastructure, the ability to update, restrict, delay, or suspend access exists outside the state, even when contracts and regulations are in place. And this same logic spread across communication systems, satellites, navigation platforms, cybersecurity software, AI analytics, and payment infrastructure, until governments no longer operated critical systems but depended on them. And advanced semiconductors became the most strategic dependency of all, because modern states cannot design or manufacture cutting-edge chips independently, and delays, export restrictions, or supply chain disruptions can instantly weaken military readiness, intelligence processing, and economic stability. Which means national power now depends on global supply chains that governments do not fully control, and software deepen this dependency further, because operating systems, AI models, analytics engines, and security tools are licensed, not owned, constantly updated, and governed by corporate roadmaps rather than public policy, which slowly shifted governments from operators to clients, because efficiency created dependency, and dependency transferred leverage, making technology companies quiet gatekeepers of state functionality. The real balance of power only becomes visible during moments of crisis, because stability hides dependency while chaos exposes it. In normal times, governments appear fully in control, issuing statements, passing laws, and projecting authority through institutions that feel solid and permanent. But when wars erupt, pandemics spread, cyber attacks hit, or sanctions are deployed, decisions no longer live in speeches or documents, they live inside systems. Modern crises unfold inside networks, platforms, satellites, cloud infrastructure, payment rails, and software layers that are largely owned and operated by private technology companies. When a government announces sanctions, it is not the announcement that matters. It is the execution, and execution happens through revoked software licenses, restricted cloud access, disabled APIs, frozen payment systems, and platform-level enforcement. These actions are technical, not political, and they only work because tech companies control the infrastructure that makes modern economies function. The same pattern appears in conflict zones, where communication and coordination depend on satellite coverage and data connectivity. And when those systems degrade, it is not ministers or generals who restore them, but engineers operating private infrastructure under commercial and geopolitical constraints. Intelligence gathering increasingly relies on AI-driven analytics, real-time data processing, and advanced chips, all of which require continuous updates, maintenance, and supply chain stability. A government may authorize action, but it cannot deploy a software patch, reroute global traffic, or restore cloud capacity on its own. In moments where speed matters more than hierarchy, the actors who can act in minutes hold leverage over those who need procedures, approvals, and legal framing. This forces governments into a new posture, one where power is exercised through coordination rather than command, and where influence depends on alignment rather than authority. Crises reveal that modern power is not absolute, it is conditional. Governments still carry legitimacy and coercive force, but the ability to execute decisions depends on infrastructure they do not fully control. This is why the resolution of modern crises often happens away from public view, inside technical rooms, private calls, and infrastructure dashboards rather than parliamentary halls. The state remains visible, but the machinery that allows it to function is invisible, and during crises that invisibility becomes impossible to ignore. Once this dependency becomes undeniable, the question shifts from denial to strategy. Can governments realistically take control back? On paper, the tools seem obvious: regulation, taxation, antitrust enforcement, national security laws, and political pressure. In practice, the challenge is structural, because regulation only works when alternatives exist, and modern technology infrastructure is not easily replaceable. Cloud platforms are deeply integrated into government operations and cannot be swapped without massive disruption. Advanced semiconductor manufacturing cannot be localized overnight, requiring decades of expertise, global supply chains, and enormous capital investment. Satellites cannot be replaced on demand, and software ecosystems cannot be rewritten without breaking compatibility across entire systems. This creates a paradox where aggressive regulation risks damaging the very infrastructure governments depend on to operate, forcing policymakers into compromise rather than confrontation. Even when fines are imposed or rules are tightened, enforcement often stops at the edge of feasibility because no government can afford to cripple its own digital backbone. Some states respond by pursuing digital sovereignty, investing in national cloud platforms, domestic chip manufacturing, sovereign satellites, and local software ecosystems. These efforts signal awareness, but progress is slow, expensive, and fragmented because technology does not scale nationally. It scales globally. Talent, capital, research, and infrastructure follow efficiency rather than borders, and even sovereign projects often rely on the same global suppliers, equipment, and intellectual property. As a result, power cannot simply be reclaimed, it must be renegotiated. The future relationship between governments and tech companies will not be defined by domination, but by dependency management. States will attempt to diversify suppliers, reduce single points of failure, and assert influence through standards, procurement, and coordination rather than ownership. Tech companies will navigate regulation while retaining control over innovation, speed, and infrastructure complexity. This does not represent the collapse of state power, but its transformation. Authority still exists, but it is exercised through negotiation, leverage, and risk management rather than direct command. In the modern world, the strongest actor is no longer the one who writes the rules, but the one who operates the systems those rules depend on. And governments are now forced to operate within that reality rather than above it.